Welcome to Capitol Pulse. A stunning collision between Silicon Valley and the Pentagon is dominating Washington today. Anthropic, the company behind Claude AI, is suing the Trump administration after the Pentagon took the extraordinary step of blacklisting it as a supply chain risk. The reason? Anthropic refused to let the military use its AI for surveillance or autonomous weapons. Meanwhile, Congress just voted to let Trump's Iran war continue with no constraints. The Pentagon has already burned through $5.6 billion in munitions, and special forces may soon be deployed on Iranian soil. 5 major stories. Let's break them down. In an unprecedented clash between a leading AI company and the US government, Anthropic has filed a federal lawsuit against the Trump administration. The trigger was the Pentagon's decision to designate Anthropic as a supply chain risk, a classification historically reserved for foreign adversaries and hostile nations. The designation means defense contractors must now certify they do not use Anthropic's Claude AI in any work with the Pentagon. According to the lawsuit, negotiations between Anthropic and the Defense Department broke down over 2 red lines that Anthropic refused to cross. First, Anthropic demanded that Claude not be used for mass surveillance of American citizens. Second, that it not be used for autonomous weapons systems without human authorization. When Anthropic held firm, the Pentagon responded with the blacklist designation. Anthropic argues in its complaint that the actions violate its First Amendment rights and exceed the government's authority. The company says the designation could jeopardize hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. In a remarkable show of solidarity, dozens of scientists and researchers at OpenAI and Google DeepMind filed an amicus brief in their personal capacities supporting Anthropic's position. This case could set a precedent for the entire relationship between AI companies and the US military. In a vote that will define the political legacy of this war, the House of Representatives narrowly rejected a war powers resolution that would have required President Trump to terminate military operations against Iran. The final tally was 212 in favor to 219 against. The resolution called on the president to end the use of armed forces and hostilities against Iran unless Congress formally declared war or authorized military force. Only 2 Republicans broke with their party to support it. Representatives Thomas Massie and Warren Davidson voted yes. On the other side, 4 Democrats voted against the resolution, including Jared Golden, Henry Cuellar, Greg Landsman, and Juan Vargas. The Senate had blocked a similar measure just 1 day earlier. The Constitution explicitly grants Congress the power to declare war, but since the Korean War in 1950, presidents have repeatedly launched military operations without formal congressional approval. Legal scholars say this vote is another example of Congress surrendering its constitutional authority to the executive branch. The practical result is clear. President Trump now has an effective green light from both chambers of Congress to continue and potentially expand the military campaign against Iran with no legal constraints. A cost estimate shared with Congress this week reveals the staggering price tag of the Iran campaign. The Pentagon spent $5.6 billion worth of munitions in just the first 2 days of strikes against Iran. To put that in perspective, that is roughly $2.8 billion per day, or $117 million per hour. The figure only covers munitions, meaning the actual total cost, including fuel, logistics, personnel, intelligence, and naval operations, is significantly higher. Independent analysts estimate the full daily cost of the war could exceed $3 billion. These numbers are landing on Capitol Hill at a sensitive moment. The national debt recently crossed $37 trillion, and the federal deficit for the current fiscal year is already projected to exceed $2 trillion. Defense hawks argue the spending is necessary to neutralize Iran's nuclear threat and restore stability to the region. But fiscal conservatives in both parties are increasingly alarmed. Several House members have privately expressed concern that the war's cost could derail domestic spending priorities, including infrastructure, education, and healthcare. The administration has not yet released comprehensive cost figures and has so far resisted congressional demands for a full accounting. President Trump is making it personal. He has officially endorsed former U.S. Navy SEAL Ed Galrain to challenge Representative Thomas Massie in the Kentucky Republican primary. This is remarkable because Massie is a sitting Republican congressman, one of Trump's own party members. But Massie committed what Trump considers an unforgivable sin. He was one of only 2 Republicans to vote in favor of the Iran War Powers Resolution, trying to constrain Trump's military authority. Massie has been one of the most consistent libertarian voices in Congress, opposing government overreach regardless of which party is in power. He voted against the Patriot Act reauthorization, against military aid packages, and now against an undeclared war. Trump's endorsement of Galrain sends a clear message to every Republican in Congress. If you challenge the president on the war, your seat is not safe. Political analysts say this move could have a chilling effect on Republican dissent as the midterm elections approach. With the primary not until May, this fight will play out over the coming weeks and could become a bellwether for the broader debate about executive war powers within the Republican Party. The most significant potential escalation in this conflict may be just days away. Multiple reports indicate that the Trump administration is actively considering deploying American Special Operations Forces on the ground inside Iran. The stated objective would be to locate and secure Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, preventing it from being assembled into a nuclear weapon. If ordered, this would mark the first time U.S. ground troops have operated inside Iranian territory. It would transform what has been an air and naval campaign into something far more complex and potentially far more costly in terms of American lives. Military planners reportedly warn that such a mission would require significant ground infrastructure, supply lines, and potentially a sustained presence in hostile territory. The risks of casualties, hostage-taking, and a prolonged ground engagement are substantial. But supporters of the plan argue that the entire point of the war was to prevent Iran from going nuclear, and that aerial bombardment alone cannot guarantee the uranium stockpile is neutralized. The decision reportedly rests with President Trump personally, and advisors say he could make the call within days. If special forces go into Iran, this war enters an entirely new phase. That is your Capitol Pulse for today. Anthropic versus the Pentagon, Congress giving Trump a blank check for war, billions being spent daily, political purges within the Republican Party, and the possibility of American ground troops in Iran.